Welcome back. In Part 1, we learned how the Kansas City Chiefs seemed to perform the role of paranormal prognosticator in foretelling the theft of crowns from political leaders. This occurred either through the deaths of players or the winning of Super Bowls collectively by the Chiefs. In Part 2, we learned how the game of football, and Super Bowl 58 in particular, are nothing more than massive fertility rituals. We learned about the beginnings of Allegiant Stadium and COVID-19 way back in 2017, and how they were linked to eclipses and the Las Vegas shooting. We learned how the future participants of Super Bowl 58 and the number of the game itself were known to Las Vegas in 2017, 6 years before it happened. And we focused a little on Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, primary participants in this massive fertility ritual. We learned how symbolically the sacred light, stolen from Trump during the 2020 election, was exchanged for the dark light of division brought back from Japan, site of the only nation nuked in a war, and delivered to the Super Bowl. We learned about Swift's favorite number, 13, and how it permeated and dominated Super Bowl 58. And we saw how Taylor Swift would honor the Chiefs and Kelce 13 weeks later in Paris, France, site of the Paris Meridian, and symbolic location referencing the division of the world. And that brings us to our final section. So, have the Chiefs been fated to reach this point from the beginning? Possibly. Or has some member of the Kansas City Chiefs sold their soul, and by extension that of the team, to the devil in order to win the championship and the Super Bowl in 2024? The person I named as the most likely candidate was Travis Kelce, mostly from his actions early in the game, who in concert, if you pardon the pun, with his famous girlfriend, singer Taylor Swift, seemed to provide us with an enticing potential mirror echo replaying of the Tom Brady-Gisele Bündchen witchcraft team. If true, my own experience with evil spirits and research into this subject has shown me that there is always a payment in blood to be extracted. As the famous line states in one of my favorite TV shows, Once Upon a Time, all magic comes with a price. That price is usually borne by those closest to us, friends and family, long before the soul of the one who made the deal is extracted. We get to see who pays the mirror for our success. Seeing misfortune, therefore, could be a telltale signature of the deal with the devil. Not only did we have the mysterious deaths of those 3 Chiefs fans in Kansas City who were found frozen to death following the last regular season game, 33 days before the Super Bowl, and the woman who was shot 3 days after the Super Bowl during the parade. We had Patrick Mahomes' father being arrested 8 days before the Super Bowl in Tyler, Texas, on a DWI charge, his third. His arrest on 3 February 2024, and his indictment on 3 April 2024, on his third DWI charge, firmly reveals the dreaded threes still continue to manifest. 30 days, another summed 3, after Patrick Mahomes Sr. was arrested, on 4 March 2024, Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce's brother, who played center for the Philadelphia Eagles, tearfully announced his retirement after 13, another 13, seasons. This was 3 weeks and 1 day, 3-1 or a mirror of 13, after the Super Bowl and in the 3rd month, so both the 3s and the 13s are being felt. Sadly, this wasn't Jason Kelce's only misfortune. On 17 April 2024, it was reported that Jason had lost his 2018 Super Bowl ring for good. Apparently, he was involved with some sort of stunt involving a pool of chili. I think we will leave it right there. I don't want to know anymore. On 30 March 2024, a summed 3-3 day and month, in yet another incident involving Texas. Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice was driving a speeding Lamborghini and became involved in a 6-car crash in Dallas. Several people were injured. Yet again, note the application of the threes. But not just the threes. You see, Rice was allegedly driving 119 miles per hour before the crash. Why 119? I mean, seriously, why not just say 120? Why report 119? Because it's the mere echo of a pair of very important esoteric numbers, 9 and 11, made famous on 9/11/2001. A little over a month later, on 7 May 2024, it was reported that Rice was under investigation for allegedly striking a photographer in a Dallas nightclub. On 2 April 2024, Jackson County, Missouri voters overwhelmingly rejected an effort to institute a sales tax to build a new stadium for the Royals downtown and to renovate Arrowhead Stadium for the Chiefs. Collectively, the two teams spent $5.7 million trying to brainwash voters into paying for their buildings instead of putting their money to use themselves, fixing whatever issues they have. For football teams in particular, a sizable portion of the common people who would be forced to fund these grandiose endeavors would never be able to enjoy them due to the price of attending a game, especially postseason. Like owning a new truck, it's simply out of reach. This led to threats of leaving the area, for example, from the wife of the Royals owner, who threw an angry, spoiled temper tantrum after the loss, claiming that the county would be lucky if both teams only relocated across state lines. This is how the rich view the poor, as if we owe them something. Just look at all the carnage, for lack of a better word. 4 dead fans, Patrick Mahomes Sr. arrested, Rashee Rice's troubles in Dallas, the very real threat of the entire Chiefs organization leaving Kansas City, and Travis Kelce's brother, Jason, losing his Super Bowl ring and choosing to retire. In the case of the latter, if the Chiefs hadn't went to the Super Bowl in 2024, would Jason Kelce have still chosen to retire? Maybe, or maybe not. If he'd have stuck it out for just one more year, he'd have another Super Bowl ring. Not only was his career over, the symbol of his success in said career was stripped from him, almost like everything about his years in football was being erased. Was his luck, if you will, being redirected to Travis as a result of the hypothetical deal with the devil? Or is this nothing but a crazy coincidence? Was all of the attention paid to Travis Kelce in 2023 merely the result of his, some would say, improbable relationship with Taylor Swift? Or were all of these events the payment for victory that wasn't deserved? And are we seeing the Chiefs crumbling before our eyes? Before we move on, allow me a brief digression, because this one is simply too perfect to let pass. On 14 March 2024, it was announced that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce were teaming up to open a new steakhouse together. They partnered with the global hospitality group Noble 33 in order to open a steakhouse named 1587 Prime. So this announcement of a partnership with Noble 33 took place on the 33rd day following the Super Bowl, and it involved opening a place called 1587 Prime. Well, 1587 is not a prime number, but it is divisible by 3, and its digital root is 3. Why do all of these 3s and 13s continue to cluster? And does a deal with the devil even matter anyway, other than to get the one taking the deal to sell his most precious part? Especially if I am correct, and the Chiefs are slated to be the indicators of a stolen crown for a chief. And if that is their ultimate purpose, then no amount of deals or satanic sacrifices or witchcraft would ever matter. But what if I'm wrong? What if there was no deal with the devil? What if there was no witchcraft helping Tom Brady win all of his games? What if all these 3s and 33s and 13s are all in my head? What if those tragic deaths just happened and weren't part of some satanic sacrifice? What if it wasn't a force of darkness that assisted the Chiefs, but one of light? I always strive to bring a balanced account, so let's concentrate on the Christian element. First, we have Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, without whom none of the Chiefs' Super Bowl victories would be possible. He engages in a prayer before every game, attends church regularly, and claims to be a devout Christian. However, he's also extremely superstitious and follows the same rituals from game to game. In other words, he doesn't really have faith in the gods. He has faith in the process, in the ritual itself. In many ways, this is no different than Tom Brady utilizing the rituals provided by his wife. Mahomes is merely following the same route as science. Find the repetition to recreate a particular result. Sadly, Mahomes, like most of us, apparently doesn't know what it means to have true faith. I'm the same way. Science inevitably can explain everything in the physical world. But what about the spiritual? The truest person of faith on the team likely has to be the kicker, Harrison Butker. If it wasn't for him, the Chiefs never would have made it to Super Bowl 58. Yes, while football is a team effort, it still comes down to the actions of key individuals in key situations. The job of the kicker is very much like that of the quarterback, only mirrored. While the quarterback uses his hands, the kicker uses his feet. If the quarterback fails to reach the end zone, but the goalposts are within the kicker's range, the latter tries to score. For the 2023 season, Butker rarely missed. Indeed, he made 33 of 35 field goal attempts. Oops, there's that number 33 again. Oh, and Butker, like Mahomes, entered the NFL in 2017. Yet another link back to that all-important critical year. After the Chiefs' victory in Super Bowl 57 the year earlier, Butker spent a week at a monastery in California in prayer and reflection, or whatever they do at such things. Clearly his beliefs, whether they be directed at an actual being or an imaginary construct, provide an environment whereby he can be the best that he can be. As I stated earlier, our beliefs help us form our reality. The very day before Taylor Swift's 87th concert of the Eras Tour, 11 May 2024, precisely 3 months after Super Bowl 58, and in the 13th week, Butker gave a commencement address at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. In it, he espoused traditional moral values, perfectly in line with his audience at a Catholic school, and he received a standing ovation at the completion. In no sane world would his comments be seen as divisive or demeaning or derogatory in any way. But this is hell, so insanity is the way of things. Quite naturally, his words upset many on the ideological left. You see, not only did Butker call out Biden for being a fake Catholic and for his abysmal handling of the COVID pandemic, he also denounced abortion rights, i.e. the right to commit murder, euthanasia, i.e. another right to commit murder, dangerous gender ideologies, degenerate cultural values in media, and the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But by far, his most vile and unforgivable sin was to praise his wife and to dare presume that the women present would actually look forward to being mothers and raising a family. No, this was simply too much for the radical left, who have been working tirelessly for decades at destroying the cohesiveness of the family. The Jewish-controlled media unleashed a firestorm of condemnation against him. Anything to knock down Christianity, their most hated enemy, even if it is fake Christianity and goddess worship. There was even a petition started on the third day, the 13th, by the way, to seek his firing from the chiefs. One of the most egregious and disturbing responses came from the Sisters of Mount St. Scholastica, which is part of Benedictine College. The nuns literally twisted his words and claimed that he said something that he did not say. For example, they stated, "One of our concerns was the assertion that being a homemaker is the highest calling for a woman." And yet, Butker never said that. In point of fact, he stated, "I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker." Do you see what they did? Butker said that being a homemaker is one of the most important titles, not the highest calling for a woman. The only thing that he was doing was lauding the efforts of his wife. Since the Me Too movement began in 2017, men have constantly been berated because they ostensibly fail to recognize the efforts of women. Here, the effort by a man to praise a woman is shamed by women. Why? Does this prove the old adage that women are never satisfied? In this case, the sisters completely invented something about which to bitch. It was similar to a bunch of witches gathered around a boiling cauldron and throwing various items in to cast a spell. Even worse, they then went on to laud their own vocation, essentially praising the superiority of childless career over family. Why is this worse? First of all, it represents vanity or pride, one of the 7 deadly sins. Second of all, motherhood is the most important endeavor for a woman in the physical world, while being a sister in the service of God would be the most important endeavor of the spiritual realm, wouldn't it? Their inability to recognize this simple fact was a clear indication of the appalling extent of their own brainwashing, their own fall. I would really like to know what they offer as counsel to children that the media has confused regarding their unchangeable gender. Do they tell them that God may have made a boo-boo in their case, and that it's okay to consider transitioning because now God has given man the ability to choose what parts of creation he can change if he wishes? Do they seriously tell children that the God they claim to worship is fallible and made a mistake? If so, that is frightening in a multitude of ways. Consider that these sisters literally took a page from Lucifer's playbook, twisted the words of Butker, and invented something out of thin air about which to become upset. They complained about him causing division, and yet they were the ones that promoted division. It's all projection. It's bad enough when the media does this crap. It is beyond acceptable. Indeed, it is absolutely appalling to consider that nuns did this. They lied, pure and simple, and when called out by many, they made no effort to make amends. They are the ones who should forfeit their jobs. They are the ones who should be seeking forgiveness. At the very least, they owe Butker an apology and a retraction. None of this is surprising because the fathers at the top at Benedictine College are just as bad and just as brainwashed. If they actually believed in the truth espoused by Christ, they would have moved to quickly set things right. they would have done the right thing. Why am I so passionate about this? Because priests and nuns must be held to a higher moral standard than the rest of their degenerate flocks. Yes, we all make mistakes, and we can all be forgiven, but we must show at least some contrition when we are wrong, shouldn't we? Did any of these nuns go to confession over their blatant lying? I wonder. What I see here is a perfect analogy to the screaming Jews lining Christ's path to the crucifixion, with the nuns playing the Jews. I can see Christ telling God the Father to forgive the nuns, for they know not what they do. Just like the Jews in Christ's time were brainwashed, so too are these representatives of the church today. Sadly, their overreaction and their inaction to correct their own sins in this matter shows that those who claim to be of Christ are not really of Christ, but, as the subtitle of my latest book queries, are actually Satanists in denial. There was at least one positive from all of the manufactured controversy. The people seemed to really be supporting Butker. Within a week, sales of his merchandise, jerseys, etc., were tops for the Chiefs. And so, given what we have seen, was the Chiefs' victory in Super Bowl 58 the result of unparalleled excellence on their part? A deal with the devil? Tremendously powerful faith in God the Father? Or was it simply a role that they were fated to play from the very beginning of their birth, to function as prophets of doom, warning of the theft of a crown for a chief? Or could it be a combination of all? Before you answer, consider the following. As stated, Harrison Butker's comments that created such controversy were made precisely 3 months after Super Bowl 58, in the 13th week. In the 3rd month, and in the 13th week afterwards, he became the highest-paid kicker in the NFL, securing a 4-year, $25.6 million contract, joining Kelsey as the highest-paid tight end and Reed as the highest-paid coach. These three got their Chiefs' kingdoms all from the win in Super Bowl 58. But then, 3 months later, Butker would undergo knee surgery on 15 November. Up to that point, the Chiefs were undefeated in the 2024 season at 9-0. 3 days later, the Chiefs lost their first game of the season to the Buffalo Bills. And while I haven't been able to confirm this, since Butker was placed on the injured reserve on Thursday, 14 November, it stands to reason that he may have been injured during the game against the Broncos on the 10th. If true, that was precisely 13 weeks prior to Super Bowl 59, a game that they lost. Oh, those crazy numbers. So what are we seeing here? First, as we have clearly seen throughout this video, there are definitely sacred numbers that seem to affect, or at the very least, betray, our reality. Not just the numbers 3 and 13, which would include 33 and 333, and any mirroring like 31, but also 5 and 7 and 9 and 11, and 17 and 19, to name a few. They all have different meanings and functions, like words in a language. They don't just reflect numerical quantity. They're also conceptual symbols. Every letter and every number is, at its core, a symbol. When we ignore these symbols, we essentially shut off half of our language. We become deaf and dumb and easily led and misled, because the elite constantly communicate using this long-ignored language. In this video, I deliberately focused primarily on how 3 and 13 were intimately tied to the Kansas City Chiefs. But if that's the case, if the number 3 was so important to the Chiefs, why did they not win their three-peat? That's a very good question. The simple answer is that their role was complete, and the next stage of the messaging was in play and handed off to another team. When the Chiefs played the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59, they played as badly as they played in Super Bowl 55 against Tom Brady. Anybody who has watched these games knows that the Chiefs were not themselves. It was like throwing a switch. Something supernatural happened in those games. Whether this was the result of witchcraft, a deal with the devil, God's will, fate, or something we don't as yet understand, something did happen. And if you are as sensitive as I am when it comes to things feeling out of place, you likely felt it with those games. But honestly, something felt off with the entire Chiefs 2024 season. They were winning games that they weren't good enough to win, that they shouldn't have won. Mahomes didn't look nearly as good in the 2024 season as he did in seasons past. Something was happening. A flip was occurring. Whatever this process was seemed to get a shove with Butker's surgery and their first loss of the season. And then, just 3 hours into the new year, there was the insane manufactured truck attack on Bourbon Street in New Orleans by a black man in a white Ford Lightning, host city for Super Bowl 59. 14 people were murdered, and dozens were injured. It felt very much like another satanic sacrifice on the change of a new year, symbolizing, again, a flip. And then, later that same day, a Tesla Cybertruck blew up outside of Trump's building in Las Vegas, site of Super Bowl 58 the previous year. 2 incidents involving electric trucks, terrorism, and the site of the current and previous Super Bowls? Seems like the focus was on the Super Bowl for some reason, and even Trump. The last vestiges of the Chiefs' association with the number 3 seem to have occurred during the championship game between the Buffalo Bills and the Chiefs, held on 26 January 2025. In particular, the game was tied at 29-all when the Chiefs kicked a field goal to gain 3 points with 3 minutes and 33 seconds left on the clock in the fourth quarter. The game was essentially over because the Bills were never able to come back. Seriously, 3 points with 3 minutes and 33 seconds left on the clock. The Chiefs would go on to lose their third postseason game of the season in Super Bowl 59. The flip was complete, and when I saw Mahomes be intercepted by the Eagles' number 33 in the second quarter during the Super Bowl and run it 38 yards for a touchdown, I knew the Chiefs were destined to lose. I knew a transfer had occurred. What happened? Did the hypothetical paranormal power now migrate to the Eagles? Why? If I am correct that the Chiefs' win in Super Bowl 58 was meant to represent the crown being stolen from Biden when he was prevented from running again, and ushering back in the Chief, Trump, with the revamped dark light of division, could the eagle have been the primary focus for Super Bowl 59's messaging? Remember, for some strange reason, 248 years after our Declaration of Independence, some empty suit in Congress thought it was necessary for the eagle to finally be named the national bird of the United States on Christmas Eve 2024. Don't forget that the aircraft that was struck by the military helicopter when landing in Washington, D.C. on the 9th day of Trump's second reign was an American Eagle. That helicopter was on a continuity of government mission. Were they trying to tell us that there will be no continuity for the government of the eagle? Now, you can laugh, but this is how the elite communicate with the brain-dead human herd. But most importantly, how did Taylor Swift seem to know that the Chiefs would lose Super Bowl 59? What do I mean? Remember, I told you that for the 2023 season, Swift only attended 13 games, 9 regular season and 4 postseason games. 13 is her favorite number. Everything revolves around that particular number for her. Everything. We witnessed some examples here. Then why, for the 2024 season, did she only attend 10 games, including the Super Bowl? For someone who openly worships the number 13, this screams that there's something wrong here. For someone who chose to honor the Chiefs and her boyfriend 13 weeks after Super Bowl 58, and yet doesn't apply the same rituals for this year, screams that she somehow knew that they would lose. But how? Or was it something else? Think back to that concert in Nanterre, France, taking place in the La Défense Arena, when Kelsey is a member of the offensive line. Could they be linked? Was she simply like Tom Brady's wife, Gisele Bündchen, who somehow knew which games her husband would win and which he would lose? Did Swift simply not even bother to maintain the illusion because that would trash her view of the power of 13 in her life? Or was this an effort to deliberately bring about the Chiefs' loss in Super Bowl 59? This is a glaring inconsistency that begs for clarification. Why didn't she follow the same rituals and attend the same number of games if 13 is so important in her life? Take note that 10 is 3 short of 13. So, yet again, the numbers 3 and 13 reign supreme. And this brings us to the whole point of this extended video. 13 months, 3 weeks and 3 days after the 3 Chiefs fans were found dead, and 3 weeks and 3 days after Super Bowl 59, we just can't get away from those 3s and 13s, folks. On 5 March 2025, yes, in the 3rd month, the Platte County prosecutor finally made 2 arrests in connection with their deaths. One of the men charged was the friend at whose house the 3 fans were found frozen. So many questions. Why did it take so long? How can there be any arrests at all when the case was 100% not being investigated as a homicide, according to the police? Why did it take the prosecutor 13 months? They essentially allowed a source of fentanyl to remain on the streets throughout that time. Why? The overt presence of these 13s and 3s certainly seems to me like the Freemasonic Brotherhood made a call to the prosecutor so that things could only happen by the numbers. Either that, or I really have uncovered the esoteric secrets underpinning all of reality. You decide. What do you think, my fellow souls? Individual Chiefs players dying, or the Chiefs team as a whole winning around the time of a coup, or the theft of a crown for a political chief? The incredible synchronicity displayed by the numbers 3, 33, 333, and 13. The links to COVID and eclipses. The possible inclusion of witchcraft, satanic rituals, or deals with the devil to influence the outcome of games. The linkage to Christ or Christmas in certain events. Groundhog Day. Biblical divisions of .333 and .666, denoting the birthright divisions of female and male, respectively. Football itself being deliberately designed as a giant fertility ritual. Is any of this real, or merely a colossal coincidence, and a product of my rather prodigious imagination? It seems too fanciful to be true, but what if it is? What if things are actually much worse? What if what you see on the surface is simply a suit of clothes with paints and powders meant to beautify and obscure the naked truth of our repressive reality. What if this video is just peeking behind the veil and glimpsing the wizard or the witch behind the scenes? I'm merely presenting my rather unique perspective on reality, or as I call it, hell. Submitted for your educated assessment. You decide what it means to you. Postscript. It's very likely that many of you are not sold on the idea of the supernatural directing the outcome of football games. However, consider for a moment the case of Tom Brady. He was a rather unimpressive prospect coming out of college, and wasn't drafted by the New England Patriots until the 6th round, 199th overall. He mostly sat out the 2000 season with very scant playtime. In the 2001 season, the Patriots would lose the first game, but then, on the third day, something both tragic and beneficial happened. The events of 9/11. In the very next game, the Patriots' starting quarterback, Drew Bledsoe, would suffer internal bleeding following a nasty hit. Brady entered the game late in the fourth quarter, but by then the Patriots' fate was sealed. They lost 10-3 to the New York Jets. Notice that team, New York Jets, especially since Jets allegedly struck the Twin Towers in New York just 12 days earlier. And 12 is another summed 3. In the next game, Brady was starter. Indeed, like someone flipping a switch, the once mediocre player would suddenly and miraculously transform and win 11 of the 14 regular season games, losing only 3. He then went on to win all 3 postseason games, including Super Bowl 36, by 3 points, giving the Patriots their very first Super Bowl win in their 3rd Super Bowl appearance, just like the reborn Chiefs would later win their 3rd Super Bowl appearance. Brady would win 6 Super Bowls for the Patriots over the span of 18 seasons, with both the first and the last win being over the Rams. But why? Was it just a crazy coincidence that 9/11 took place and then everything changed? Things seemed to flip. Look at the team's name, Patriots. At that time, patriotism was reborn, and the U.S. would wage war against manufactured enemies. Some of these things can certainly be manipulated by the elite who rule us. But what about Tom Brady's turnaround? What about Mahomes winning by 3 points with a 3-yard touchdown and 3 seconds left on the clock, and throwing for 333 yards? Clearly, there is something paranormal or outside of our accepted understanding taking place. Or was it all a case of witchcraft? Either way, things are not as they appear. But did life really just flip after 9/11? Or did we all simply die? Did the world actually end at that point and we didn't realize it? Like various parasites or fungi continue to live on within a body after death? Or perhaps has death itself, instead of being experienced in a tiny moment, been drawn out over several decades so that the pain and horror can be experienced as long as possible? Sound crazy? Think about it. Every decade prior to 2000 had a very distinct flavor. When you think about the 1990s, or the 80s, or the 70s, or the 60s, or the 50s, or the 40s, or the 30s, or the 20s, the images that come to mind reveal that every decade was its own unique and brilliant self, almost like a child of time. It was a moment all its own. But what happened after 9/11? That unique decadal flavor is now gone. Cars primarily became white or black or gray, dreary colors of death, instead of being bright and vibrant. Movies and TV started to stagnate to the point that all we have are poor remakes and reboots. Music became bland and uninspired. Even the Super Bowl started having the same participant over and over, with the Patriots appearing 9 times in 18 seasons, on average every other year. Had that ever happened in football to that point? We're now in the 3rd decade since 9/11, and nothing has been unique about any of these 3 decades. It's all the same. Why? Simple. We can't create anything new because we don't exist. We are like fleas on a dog's back, but the dog is dead. Look at the debasing of cultural morals that went into overdrive since 9/11. All around us, society is in a death spiral. It didn't happen overnight. It took some time for the flywheel of time to stop spinning, but it did happen. The body is dead, and we are all either dead or dying, certainly culturally, and very likely even physically. There is much more to this story, but the elite want us to believe that the spiritual center no longer exists. It's all satanic. Every aspect of our reality, our deathality, revolves around those who rule, openly seeking to kill us. They've always done this, but they've always hidden in the shadows. This new openness began in 2020 with the scamdemic. Why 2020? Because having 2020 vision means that we can now see clearly. Evil stepped out of the shadows to openly take a bow for leading us here. They know that nothing will be done to stop them. They are the cleanup crew, the vultures, the ones sent to complete the crucifixion and get on with the Great Reset, the resurrection. This cell of time is ending because time itself is literally running out, just like the air in a diver's tank eventually becomes depleted. It's why COVID's main symptom was breathing difficulties that mimic high-altitude sickness. It's all part of the message they are sending. If you found this topic interesting, please check out my other videos and my books. My website is www.mastersofthemirror.com. Thanks.